It's okay with me. You're recording a recording, but it's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so this is a recording that we did for the state of Ohio, who is going through a similar process than the state of Indiana in evaluating IB courses for credit due to legislation in their state. And so in this recording, we're going to deal with group two, the languages, foreign languages as they're commonly referred to, or world languages. And this is a two-part recording that the folks from the state of Ohio kindly shared with me. The first part, I will be speaking to a general introduction of the IB, sort of an IB 101, and then we will jump directly into a conversation with curriculum developers from the IB who work on this group of languages. And so this is about 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes or so. And we are now providing this recording so that our colleagues in the state of Indiana can have access to it. I will share my screen and we will begin. Everybody, my name is Marie Vivas, and I am the Senior Recognition Manager for the US and Canada. I support universities in the work of university recognition, how to give credit, how to be more welcoming to students, understanding the IB, anything that supports the work of the transition from our IB secondary credentials into higher education in this part of the world. And I have with me today my colleague Darlene, and I will ask her to introduce herself and then we'll come back to the presentation.
So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Darlene Delaney, and I am the curriculum manager for the diploma program for Language B and Language Ab Initio, two of our language acquisition subjects. I've been a curriculum manager here for the last 8 years, and prior to that, I was a DP teacher of languages and coordinator. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you very much. So we are going to go ahead and move forward. This is about what we call language acquisition. So it's group two subjects in the IB diploma scheme, and they are for language learners. So students who are at different stages of learning a different language, and languages are required as part of the IB curricular framework. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. And I thought it would be nice to start out with a little introduction onto what IB is. There is a much bigger presentation, but coming in here cold, it felt to me like it would be nice to have sort of who are we and what do we do. So the IB was started in the late 60s in Europe, particularly in the UK and in Switzerland, to serve students whose families were moving from country to country for either diplomatic, NGO, or corporations postings. And so the idea was to create a high school leaving certificate that would allow them entry into university into the next country they were going to or into their home country. So this was post-war Europe and, Cold War Europe. And so the idea of promoting a sense of working together across barriers, across cultural barriers, across linguistic barriers, across national barriers, to create a better, more peaceful world is part of the IB's mission, and it's very much baked into everything we do. Next slide. So one thing that distinguishes IB from other curricula is the fact that we are actually trying to nurture a set of traits in our students about the kinds of citizens and students we want them to be and how they present into the world. So that is called the IB Learner Profile. And as you can see to the left are the traits that we are trying to promote for our students, all the way from our earliest primary years program to the high school leaving programs that we're going to be focused on today. As you can see, we want students to be inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk takers, balanced, and reflective. And we have been reflecting a lot, because this is something we do in IB, on how that fits into
the kind of learning and the kind of skills that young people are required to have in the 21st century, and given the fact that technology, communication, information move at such a great speed and are constantly changing. So first we have sort of that interdisciplinary aspect of IB, it combined into that global awareness piece that I mentioned earlier, but also into civic and environmental literacy, keeping in mind the big questions that we're trying to address as a planet right now. Then learning and innovation, creativity, critical thinking, communication, collaboration. How do we work together? Again, that concern of breaking barriers, and now in a virtual world, collaborating and communicating with folks around the planet in different locations, many times virtually. How do these skills come into play in the 21st century? And of course, critical thinking at the core of everything that IB does. Information skills as well. Literacy in the areas of information, media, and technology are things that are constantly affecting our our milieu, our planet, and for our students, it's important for them to be able to have the required skills to be able to navigate this world of fast-paced information in a nimble way. And then life and career skills, sort of those metacognitive skills that we're asking students to acquire and to bring to the fore. So flexibility and adaptability, obviously, in the current uh, technological push, initiative and self-direction, so that sort of self-management piece, also extremely important when they come to university, students who are ready to manage their time, to take initiative, to become responsible for their own learning, and of course the social and cross-cultural skills, as we mentioned, which are baked into pretty much everything in IB. Next slide. Okay, so where are we? We are all over the world. The Americas, the Africa, Europe, and Middle East region, and Asia Pacific. You will see that the divide between public and private schools is fairly close. There is a perception that IB is a private school program, but as you can see here, the 46% of our schools are public. And you can see that across all four programs, we have representation in every region. We do have a primary program, primary years program, which runs from age 3 to about age 11, a middle years program that runs from age 12 to age 15, and then the two school leaving programs, the diploma and the career related program, which are the last 2 years of high school. We like to refer to these as a 16 plus. You will see that the United States is the top country delivering IB programs, and specifically diploma programs are highly represented, followed by Canada, China, India, and we're seeing a considerable amount of growth both in China and India. Next slide. However, we're here to talk about the state of Ohio. And just so you know, we are close to 2,000 IB World Schools in the United States right now, and 89% of those schools are public schools. These are your students in Ohio. They're coming from public schools. 62% of U.S. public schools are actually Title I schools. So they are historically underrepresented, underserved communities for whom the question of credit becomes a matter of affordability as well as a matter of encouragement to take the courses, the challenging courses that will really prepare them and give them the skills to thrive at university. So this is why the question of credit becomes so important. Next slide. So we do have three options for our students in that 16 to 19 age group. The diploma program, the full diploma program, would cover 6 subjects and the core that consists of the extended essay, theory of knowledge, and creativity, activity, service, CAS, which are the co-curricular activities. I'll describe this more in a moment. Then we have our most recent program, the career-related program, which had its first cohort in 2012. This program requires students to do 2 or more diploma courses. Then they have their own core, which consists of the reflective project, the language development project, and the personal and professional skills. And then they have a career pathway, a career-related studies, which is usually arranged by the school, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the third option, and you may see a lot of this coming from U.S. students and students in your own state, are students that are taking just a couple of subjects in IB, 2 or 3 subjects, and they may be combining that with AP or with other high school credentials that are being offered, because the U.S. public schools will frequently offer a variety of different options and students tend to go more modular and mix and match. Great, moving on to the next slide. I do want to spend a couple of minutes describing the diploma program to you. The diploma program is our flagship program. It started in 1968. It is very much student-centered learning, so that's why we start with silhouettes in the middle and then approaches to learning and approaches to teaching, because students and teachers are asked to sort of take responsibility for how they learn, how they apply knowledge. So that piece of it, students becoming responsible for their own learning, is extremely important. Moving out, you have the core. Theory of knowledge is a course that deals with the question of what is knowledge, how do we ascertain knowledge, how do we apply it, how we think about it critically, how do we think about it ethically. Then we have the extended essay, which is a 4,000-word research paper independently done by the student on an IB topic of their choice. And then CAS, Creativity Activity Service, so that are the co-curricular activities which we ask students to keep a journal about and reflect on. Then we're going to move into the 6 subject groups. Before we move into that, there's always the question of what is higher level and what is standard level. And so let me just put it to you this way. Higher level courses were designed, remember, in that original environment where the schools were in Europe, they were looking at European universities where there are no liberal arts requirements. And so they were looking at, we need those courses that are in depth, and following that high school model in Europe where students take 3 to 4 very in-depth courses the last 2 years of high school. That's what the higher level courses were designed to be, directly for those students who were going to be in Europe and going directly into a major of their choice. And then the standard level courses were designed sort of to give a well-rounded student. So to meet that, if you think of the standard level courses of being equivalent to your AP courses, of being courses that are equally rigorous but not in as much depth, think of those as your liberal arts requirements. And that's the difference between a higher level and a standard level course. There's academic rigor, the skills are quite similar. It's just a matter of the higher level courses having extensions that go deeper into the material that's required for the major. So moving along, we ask students to take 3 courses at the higher level. Again, that concentration specialization, particularly for European universities, and 3 courses at the standard level. We do have 6 different groups. So studies in language and literature, first language, the language of the school, the language of instruction, the language of the country, whatever is the strongest academic language for the student, they would be doing that as a language and literature course. Then we have language acquisition, which is what we're going to talk about today. Those are the courses for language learners. Individuals and societies contemplates the social science and humanities. Sciences, group 4, and mathematics and the arts. So we ask students to take one in each one of these and complete the core requirement, and that's how they meet the IB diploma and obtain the credential. Next slide. This is just in written down form what I just explained, because some folks learn differently, so wanted you to have it there. But note that the subjects are graded on a 1 to 7 point scale. Next slide. And then we move into the career-related program. As I mentioned earlier, this is our newest program. This program is a hybrid. It combines technical skills, employability skills, and academic skills. And so if we think about that in the concept of how does this work together, we start, of course, with the students and the approaches to teaching and approaches to learning and the learner profile, and taking responsibility for those elements of learning. And then we move into the core. It's slightly different than the diploma core because the different elements are focused on the career pathway that the student is choosing to continue on for the last 2 years of high school. So the core here consists of service learning, a reflective project, which is a 3,000-word research paper on an ethical concern in their particular career pathway, a language development, because while we're not requiring that they take a language course here, we are requiring them to have at least that language experience, and it may be done through an avenue that's different than an IB course. Personal and professional skills, how do we present ourselves? How do we um, communicate clearly in the workspace and in the study space? All of these skills that are sort of the metacognitive skills of how do we work and how do we study and how do we work together are in the personal and professional skills. Then we have the diploma courses. Students are required to take a minimum of 2 diploma courses. In our experience and in the research that we have, students are taking between 3 and 4 diploma courses. They're welcome to take them at the higher and standard level. They get to choose that. So generally speaking, students will complement their career pathway through their courses. And then the career-related studies. The career-related studies are organized through the school. In the United States, this is done through career and technical education many times. So you may have a student, for example, who's doing a pre-engineering track as a CTE track, and they're taking math and physics in IB to sort of strengthen that academic rigor and depth that's related to the career studies. So that part is run and graded by the school. We just ask them to confirm that it's being done. But that's what students then will have to complete the career related certificate. So if we move to the next slide, again, just a visual, a different way to present the information for you to explore later on. Next slide. I wanted to take a moment because we are spending quite a bit of time on the standard level courses today. There's pretty strong recognition in the state of Ohio already for the higher level courses. In July, we published American Council on Education did an evaluation of our standard level qualifications, and they published their report in July. This is on their webpage. So we hope that this will be a good jumping off point for the evaluation that you are going to be doing. Some of the work has already been done, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. Next slide. So for most courses, it has been recommended that universities award at least 3 credits for IB scores of 4 or higher at the standard level subjects. Uh, Group 2, the one that you're talking about, though, has some slight differences. They do recognize that the students are actually competent beyond the sort of 1 semester of credit. And then I think that Darlene will get a little bit more into this, but the recommendations and some of the suggestions of courses are already there on the website, on the American Council on Education website, so that could be a jumping off point for many of you. Next slide, and I think I'm turning it over to Darlene now. Yes.
Great, thank you, Marie. If you could go to the next slide, I just want to reiterate what Marie has already said about university placement, and not to bury the lead. I prefer starting with the end in sight. So based on what we've done with the curricula and the outcomes for these 2 subjects, along with the ACT-FUL, which you're likely more familiar with, and the CEFR proficiency comparisons, a student who achieves a 4 in the course should receive a minimum of 3 university credits. But as you'll see later, that could go up to 12 potentially in the case of language B standard level, which we'll refer to as SL just for ease and convenience. So what that means is that placing a student into a beginner or introductory level course when they've already achieved beyond that would likely not provide the degree of challenge that they would need to continue to develop in the language, which is what we want to be able to do. And it could actually lead to a boredom for the student and somewhat of a waste of time and or money if they're paying for their university. So depending on the university's language courses and on the student's proficiency, then a student who achieves a 4 could fairly easily place out of 2 courses and possibly higher. So there are further details later on in this presentation that will go into as to how this works and why this works this way. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So just as an overview, Marie kind of touched upon what we like to call sometimes group 2. So these are our language acquisition subjects, which we have available. And the focus of this presentation will be on language B and language ab initio, which are the modern languages. And they're not showing up. They're showing up in my presentation that I have, but I don't know if there was a transition, Marie, that you'd put in. But there we go. Thank you. So our modern languages are language B, which we offer at standard level and at higher level. We won't go into higher level too much here, but just understand that it follows the same basic syllabus and it has the same assessment model as our standard level course for language B, except that the study of a minimum of 2 literary works is required for higher level, as well as the expectations of proficiency that the student both enters with and exits with. For language ab initio, we have that available at standard level only. For language B, we offer 22 different languages, and for language ab initio, we offer 15. We also offer classical languages, which are Latin at higher and standard level, and classical Greek at higher and standard level. The next slide, please. So just a little bit about the nature of these subjects. With language ab initio, it's designed for those students who have very, very limited and ideally no previous experience in the target language. For language BSL, standard level, it's designed for those students who can already communicate in the target language in simple and unrehearsed situations on familiar topics. They might have some difficulty in complex and unrehearsed situations on either familiar or unfamiliar topics. And for language B, higher level, it is designed for those students who are still learning the language. They still need to develop in it. They're not at the highest level of proficiency that would enable them to easily study the language in the language itself for academic purposes and beyond, which would be, or if it's one of their first or best languages, it's not designed for that student. It's designed for the student who is still learning the language. And they will be able to already communicate in simple and complex and unrehearsed situations on a range of topics that are both familiar and unfamiliar. And they're going to be able to engage with literary works originally written in the target language. So the students who can already communicate successfully in the language, target language, on that range of topics in a variety of familiar and unfamiliar contexts, if they can read, analyze, respond to complex texts in the target language, they would take one of those studies in language courses that are in our group, our first group that you'd seen earlier. And as you can see, it's really the degree of proficiency in the target language that a student has, which determines the most appropriate subject and level. That degree, the degree to which that proficiency develops during the course and the complexity of the language that's produced, the ability to handle the language that's received and the ability to interact and communicate, as well as that requirement to study is the important part. So that's really the part that differentiates between those two subjects and within language B, the two levels. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the aims of both language B and ab initio. They are identical. These courses were developed, these subjects were developed in tandem, and these are the aims that we would like the students to achieve by the end of their 2 years of study. So entering proficiency, again, has an impact on how the degree to which they're probably going to develop and the outcomes. But in general, these are the 8 areas in which they're going to develop by taking one of our subjects. So international mindedness through the study of languages, cultures, ideas, and issues of global significance, enabling the students to communicate in the language they've studied in a range of contexts and for a variety of purposes, encouraging through the study of texts and social interaction, the awareness and appreciation of a variety of perspectives of people from diverse cultures, and not only the cultures of where the language, the target language is spoken, but cultures in general. to develop students' understanding on the relationship between the languages and cultures with which they're familiar, developing their awareness of the importance of language in relation to other areas of knowledge. So the connections between their study of language and how language is used both as a medium for study in other subjects, but for developing their own languages. Providing students through language learning the process of inquiry with these opportunities for intellectual engagement and the development of critical and creative thinking skills. And that's one of the things we see very significantly with the study of language, that it uses and develops critical thinking skills. Providing students with a basis for further study, kind of going into university and studying it or doing something with it post-university or wherever they may be going if it's not directly to university. And then providing them with something to do for leisure. So enjoying having learned another language, and then fostering creativity and the lifelong enjoyment of language learning. Next slide, please. So their assessment objectives are also identical. So through both of those subjects and at both of the levels, we want to make sure that the students can communicate clearly and effectively for a variety of purposes, that they understand and use language that's appropriate to this range of interpersonal and intercultural contexts and audiences, that they can use and understand language in order to respond to ideas with fluency, asterisks, as fluent as they can for whichever subject and level that they're in, and accuracy, to identify, organize, and present their ideas on a range of topics, and to understand, analyze, and reflect upon a range of written, audiovisual, and audiovisual text, so multimodality. You may have already seen the subject briefs for these two subjects. They are available on ibo.org. And they will go into much more detail about, well, they will go into greater detail, not much more. They will go into greater detail about the content of the subjects in terms of how it is organized. I'll touch upon that in just a few moments, and also on the details of the assessment model. If you have questions about that at the end of the presentation, I'm more than happy to go into the details of the assessment model as well. But let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit more about the nature of the curriculum, or I'm sorry, about what's in the syllabus and the student development. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this presentation specifically addresses language. So the text, the themes, the concepts, international mindedness, and the approaches to learning skills that are covered in the syllabus. So they're going to develop the ability to communicate by developing through language, through themes, and there are 5 that we'll see in a moment, and through texts. They'll develop conceptual understandings of how language works in terms, and what we consider in this syllabus to be the conceptual understandings of context, audience, purpose, meaning, and variation, making sure that the message that they are delivering is appropriate and will be both effective or both successful and effective. They will develop their receptive, productive, interactive skills, and they will produce, as I said earlier, text for audiences, context, and purpose associated with both academic and personal interests. And this is at, again, both subjects at the 2 different levels. Students will study authentic text written originally in the target culture for members of the target cultures. And they will also in turn develop international mindedness through the study of the language culture and the issues of global significance. And we'll see that reflected in the themes on the next slide. So next slide, please. So the syllabus has 5 prescribed themes. These are designed to be broad and interconnected and overlapping. They are identities, experiences, social organization, human ingenuity, and sharing the planet. Because the structured learning environment is crucial for the success of beginning language learners, however, the ab initio syllabus specifically prescribes 4 topics for each of these 5 prescribed themes. So in total, there would be 20 topics that must be addressed in the language ab initio course. So when teachers who know their students best are able to design their taught curriculum around these 5 themes and focus on, for ab initio, some of those 4 prescribed topics per theme. For ab initio, I'm sorry, for language BSL, we give the teachers guidance in terms of what recommended topics they could look at, or they could go completely off piste and go into something that we haven't recommended. It's all up to them and how it suits their context best. What's important is developing the language and developing in the aims of the course that we've already outlined. So they've got a lot of freedom to plan the way they feel would get those kids to develop the best way possible with the IB sort of context around it. Next slide, please. So I talked about the approaches to learning a little bit earlier. These are the 5 of them that are thinking skills, research skills, communication skills, social skills, and self-management skills. And although all of these are used and developed in the Language B and Language ab initio courses, the skill of communication is at the heart of language acquisition. However, all of these others support, they interconnect, they support each other. They're not done in isolation. So we'll see in communication that people will be very social, that they will have to manage themselves in order to take turns, that they'll use thinking skills in order to resolve communication gaps, that they might do research into whatever the topic they might be discussing, or they might have to present upon which they might have to present. So they're all very connected, and they all have language at their core. Next slide, please. So focusing now on the conceptual understandings that go beyond those of context, audience, purpose, meaning, and variation that I discussed earlier. They're also developing the conceptual understandings of how language works. How is it that we use words and then letters to put into words, or characters or symbols to stand for words? How they'll develop a conceptual understanding of how understanding the ones I just mentioned, context, audience, purpose, meaning, and variation, contribute to successful and effective communication. They're going to understand how language and culture are intrinsically intertwined. They are inseparable, and they paint a picture of an individual and their worldview. They will develop the understanding of how understanding and being able to communicate another language fosters intercultural understanding. So it makes them a more empathetic person, and someone who is able to see another person's point of view. It also enables them to understand how people think about the world around them. So these are among those that they'll develop. There are others, but these are the primary ones. Developing these both uses and develops critical thinking skills, which then in turn are transferable to other subjects, at least near transfer between languages, and likely far transfer into other subjects, and also then into real world situations. Next slide, please. So here we have just a comparison of how the marks that are achieved by a student for their IB diploma at the end of the 2 years of studies, 2 years of their studies, kind of how they align with both the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, the CEFR proficiencies, and you'll see here that this is based on a 2023 benchmarking study that looked at selected IB language courses and compared them to the Common European Framework of Reference for languages. This is available on ibo.org. The full study is, as well as an executive summary, as well as a bunch of graphics and the data behind the study. So according to this, a student who receives a grade of 4, which is what we've been talking about, in Language BSL would be considered to be at a CEFR of B1 in terms of proficiency, which then aligns with ACTFL Intermediate High for productive skills, and at Advanced Low, which is even better for their receptive skills. Unfortunately, the study was not also done for language ab initio, but given the manner in which these courses are developed in tandem, the commonalities they have in their structure and in their assessment models, and in which the assessments themselves are designed, a score of 4 on a language ab initio that a student gets in language ab initio would likely place a student right around A2 proficiency, or if you're looking at the ACTFL guidelines, around intermediate mid, or in some cases, intermediate low on the sorry, their productive skills. So that's a bit of the difference between these the two courses. So all of this, the actual information is of course available on ACTFL's website. And like I said, the benchmarking study is available on our IBO website. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this is just a description of what, how the CEFR describes that B1 and B1.2 that we were just talking about, that the students would achieve by the time they finish language BSL with a mark of 4. So these, they can understand main ideas of, for B1, they can understand the main points of clear standard input receptive skills on matters that are familiar and that are regularly encountered in school, work, leisure, etc. Going up to B2, they can understand the main ideas of complex texts on both concrete and abstract topics. So that's quite impressive. There's a lot of conceptual work going on there, and a lot of critical thinking going on there. So based on this study, again, we're looking at a student who is exiting with a 4 out of 7 from language BSL, who can actually produce clear, detailed text on a range of subjects and explain a viewpoint and a topical issue that gives advantages and disadvantages of various options. So it's quite sophisticated. It's quite sophisticated language in a relatively short time, and generally students are coming in with a few years of language study prior to entering language BSL, and getting to the point where they can defend positions and give pros and cons of situations. It gets them through a number of different situations in real life as well as academics. Could you go to the next slide, please? So just in summary, and not to, and as I said before, we kind of started with the end in mind. A student who achieves a 4 in the course should be prepared for further study in and of the target language at university without the need for any introductory level courses. Depending on their actual specific proficiency, if they get above a 4, they might place into the middle of those 200 level courses as well. So and I took a look, and I know this is for the entire state of Ohio, but I did take a quick look at the Ohio State University's introductory 2101 course in French. It looks like a BSL student who achieves a 4 or a 5 might struggle just a little bit in that 200 level course, but it would likely be entirely appropriate for someone who achieved a 6 at language BSL. And also based on the language ab initio course curriculum and the outcomes, along with those proficiency equivalencies I showed earlier, a student who achieves a 4 at ab initio should be prepared for further study in and of the target language at university without the need for basic instruction in the language. So just looking at OSU's French 101.01 class, beginning French, they actually state that it's not open to native speakers of the language, students with EM credit, or to students who have 2 or more years of study in this language in high school, which is basically our ab initio students. So OSU directly places them out of contention for taking that course if they've even had 2 years of study in this language, regardless, I suppose. Ideally, they'd have passed it, and for us, that would be a 4. Excuse me. And that's on the OSU website in the course catalog description. Next slide, please. So that's really the end of the presentation of the data, a quick tour of what the language BSL and ab initio course subjects look like. I am more than happy to answer any questions you might have. I am also more than happy to be reached by email if you want to think about anything before asking a question or need any more information about the subjects.
I think we've captured the presentation, and if
Okay.
you can share it that way with folks who need more information.
Gotcha.